Alrighty, everybody. I wanted to come and do another video on mandated reporting. Well, a video on mandated reporting. This is a topic that someone in one of my tutoring sessions asked me to explain to them a little further. So normally when I do tutoring, it's mostly around questions and answers, and rationales, and logic, reasoning, critical thinking, that kind of thing, process of elimination. But then sometimes there are times where people need a little more review on content area. And so whenever that happens, I try to make a video because it saves on tutoring time for people in the future who, you pay $35 an hour to talk specifically about the exam, which is mostly made up of you don't really need to study the content so much for the exam because you should already know the content, having graduated from graduate school with an MSW. But the exam is more so about how to take the exam and how to answer the questions. So if I can reduce that time taken in your tutoring session discussing content by giving you free YouTube videos, then we can focus that time in tutoring on how to take the exam and strategies for taking the exam. So anyway, mandated reporting is always a touchy subject for most social workers because we don't know, or some of us, we don't know, are we always mandated reporters, whether we're on the job or not. Some people fear that they have to report all the time if they're going to report, because some people work in environments where there are always things going on where it seems like you should be reporting. When I worked with families in transitional housing, there was a lot of things going on that it seemed like, every day I would have to make a report if I were to report every single issue that went on, which I did not. So you have to kind of know what the laws are. You have to know what your agency says. And then you also have to know that you should work with or for an agency that abides by the NASW Code of Ethics, since you are a social worker, especially when you get licensed. So mandated reporting is when you observe or suspect that something wrong is happening, that can be harmful to a person, specifically a minor child, someone who's mentally or physically handicapped, a vulnerable adult, vulnerable child, that kind of thing. Most of the time, reports are made due to domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, or suspected neglect or abuse for a minor or an elderly person. So there are some states that require, and I am looking at my notes if you see me looking down because I want to make sure I'm giving you accurate information. There are some states that require you to you are mandated to report at all times, whether you're on the job or not. And there are 18 states that require this, that, whether you're on the job and you see a couple disciplining their child, going too far, they're hitting them with shoes and belts and things like that, all the way to if you are, it's just Saturday afternoon, you're in Walmart, you're not on the clock, you're not at the job, and you see someone in the aisle beating their kid. So whether you're on the job or not, there are 18 states in our nation that require you to that mandate you to report. Those states are Delaware, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Mississippi, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming, and then Puerto Rico as well. Always mandated reporting. You're always going to be required to report if you are practicing or living in any of those states. The remaining 32 states, which I won't list out because, you can figure those out. If you're not in a professional role, you do not have to report. But if you suspect something is going on, you can make a report, although you're not required to if you live in those other 32 states. So just be aware of that. And that's as of March 2013. That's the research that I found. So you may want to look and just make sure that hasn't been updated since March 2013. There are also laws that if you make a report in good faith and there's nothing actually going on, that you are still protected legally, as long as you made that report in good faith. So as long as you're not maliciously out there making reports and giving false information, and it turns out that there's no incident or no harm being done, then you are protected because you thought in good faith that something was going on, and it just so happened to be that there wasn't anything going on. Now, if you work for an agency, you need to know what your agency says about mandated reporting. For instance, I work at a law enforcement agency, and I'm a licensed social worker, and I'm the only one there that is a licensed social worker, and I read all of the reports for all the crime that happens from day to day, and there's a lot of times where I'm like, I need to report this, but my agency says that I'm only allowed to report if children witness domestic violence. So, there may be a report where there's something else going on that may kind of be questionable, but my role in this agency is not to report those things because I work with law enforcement anyway, and all of us are mandated reporters. So, but only when children are witnessing domestic violence, if they hear it, see it, or are in, earshot distance from the actual incident, then I'm required to make that report. Now, there have been some reports where there were no charges made, but the child was still there, and I just go ahead and make the report anyway because I want to cover myself as an independent social worker, as an independent person who happens to be a social worker. Let me clear that up, because I'm not licensed independent social worker, but as a person who has a social work license, I do want to cover myself, just in case. It's better to go ahead and report than not to, and get in trouble down the road for not reporting. Let's see what else this says. Although your agency employer is ultimately responsible for what you do on the job, merely informing a supervisor or colleague about your suspicions of child maltreatment does not discharge your legal duty as a mandated reporter to make a report to Child Protective Services. You must make the report yourself or ensure that the report is being made on your behalf, depending on the state in which you work. Okay. Also, you may want to confer with a colleague about, whether or not they think that you should make a report. So if you have a case where you're not sure, you should report, then talk with your colleagues, talk with your supervisor. And sometimes your supervisor or your colleague, they might agree with you about your concerns, but then they may advise you not to make a report. Sometimes, though, you may still feel like you should make the report, or that if you make a report against your supervisor's wishes, that your supervisor might retaliate against you for making the report, or, give you some kind of consequences for going against what they said. There are laws in place that prohibit retaliation from your employer for you making a report in good faith. So just keep that in mind. And whenever you do talk with a colleague or supervisor about these kind of things, you always want to document everything anyway as a social worker, but you definitely want to document your conversation with that colleague or supervisor, what their suggestions were, what you thought, what the outcome was, and whatever contact you have with that client, you also want to document everything, so that if it comes up in the future, you will have dates, times, notes about what happened and why you did what you did or didn't do, why you didn't do a certain thing. All right, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. About mandated reporting. You are going to report any suspected or observed neglect, child abuse, sexual assaults, harm, physical harm, mental harm, financial harm done against a vulnerable person or elderly person or minor or child. Okay, so please like and subscribe, share this with your colleagues and your friends, let them know about my channel, and check out my website, daytodaysocialwork.wix.com/my site. All right, until next time, we'll see you later.